Hello there. Welcome to day 9. 9. Yes, it is 9. Day 9 of Creator Mars 2019, where we make some IMVU stuff. So yesterday we finally managed to do our whoops, wrong one. Finally managed to do our beanie, our thick woolen beanie. No, which one was it? Isn't that one? I wish we could file. Yeah, so there's our thick woolen beanie. So today, what might be nice to try and do for this is to give it an accompanying thick woolen scarf. So that is what we'll try today. Try and make a thick woolen scarf. And for that, we'll be using the clothing file, the clothing starter file. So essentially, a scarf would be an item of clothing. So what we'll do is append the beanie into the clothing file so that we have a reference point, particularly from a style point of view, and then we can build the scarf up around the around the avatar using the beanie as a reference. So first thing then we need to do is open the starter file. So depending on where it is saved, I should probably drop the link in. Link. Starter files. Copy, paste. So you can download all the Blender 2.8 compatible starter files. So that's clothing, accessories, rooms, etc., etc. And if you want to learn more about them, there's introducing the starter files. And if you want to learn more about creating for Blender 2.8 in general, there is this copy paste. So click all of those and work your way through them. So depending on where your file is, once you've downloaded it, file, open, and then browse to wherever it is located. In this instance, it's actually on the desktop. So select and open, or just drag and drop from wherever it is. So we want the clothing file, that one. Open. So this is the clothing starter file, and this differs basically because of the skeleton. So that's the clothing one. That's the one for poses, so the bones are pointing all over the place because they have to be orientated relative to what IMVU is expecting for manipulating the avatar. For clothing, because this is a pose files modify the avatar skeleton, so the skeleton in Blender has to replicate the bone orientations of IMVU, whereas for clothing, the skeleton replicates what the avatar actually is in terms of having leg bones and arm bones all in the right places. But the skeleton for this has some special bones if we switch to pose mode and disable those, we can see that some of the bones are tinted orange, and those are basically control bones without getting too technical. So what they allow is you can click one bone, press the G key, and it will manipulate several bones. So they control a chain of bones, and this just makes it easier come time to test the articulation of the mesh to make sure that it's articulating properly relative to what you're expecting to see. Need to fix that. But they are basically at the cardinal bones. So at the wrist bone, that controls the arm, and at the foot, that controls the leg. So we'll see this when we enable the meshes. And we can see how the skeleton is articulating the mesh. And what we're going to be doing when you're making, what we're going to be doing today with the scarf, but what happens generally when you are making clothing is that you're pairing the mesh or sections of it to the skeleton so that each bone of the skeleton controls a particular section of the mesh. So that's controlling that section of the hips and this section of the lower leg. So when you're making your clothing, that's essentially all you're doing is matching up your mesh to whatever bone might be controlling it. So clear all of that. So first thing we want to do is append our hat. Append, Blender files, number 10. Append objects. So we now have to find it. I think it was just called Beanie Mesh. There it is, Beanie Mesh. So when you append files, the blend file, the .blend, acts like a zip archive. So when you select the file, you're actually drilling down into its contents. And to append, we're generally always loading in objects. So there is our Beanie Mesh. Select and append. So there is our Beanie Mesh in place. So scarf, let's just save this so we have a starting point. Save as. Create. That's 2019. This is day 9. 1. Right, so what we basically want to do is follow the similar principles that were used on day 7 and 8 to create the Beanie Mesh. So essentially what we're going to do is just block out a shape and then add more detail as we go. So we're adding incremental detail and shaping that detail as we go. So what object should we start with? Let's try a box. It seems counterintuitive because the torso is essentially the neck area in particular is a cylinder, an 8 or 10-sided cylinder. But starting off with an 8-sided cylinder means that we've got more structure to shift around than we might necessarily need. So if we start with a box, it means we've got very minimal structure to manipulate, which we can then add detail to after the fact. So let's get some, hang on. So a box, add, mesh, cube. That's probably added it at the feet of the avatar. It has, and it will be tiny. So it is there. So let's do view, frame selected, and it is super tiny. That's it relative to the arch of the foot. There's the big toe. So we just want to increase the size of that. Scale. Change our widgets. So we're using our widgets, our manipulation widgets, to move our objects around, scale them. And just roughly place that. It's hiding in a cardboard box. What else we want to do at this point, object properties, viewport display, enable wireframe. And what that does is it draws a wireframe around the object like this. Whoops. All these lines, that's the wireframe. And that just enables us to clearly see the structure of the mesh as we're working on it. So select the box, wireframe. So let's have a look and see what to do with this. So first thing will be to add some loop cuts. So 1, 2, and then 3. And then just start selecting elements. So if we want to select loops, so a loop is a continuous selection or collection of edges or vertexes or faces. The shortcut for that is Alt, A-L-T, and then click, left or right click depending on how you've got your mouse set up. Or alternatively, if you find that it's actually quite tricky to do, so if you select the edge, select an edge from the loop that you want to select. So we select this forward facing edge here because we want to select a loop around the box. And then from the edge menu, no, it's not edge menu, it's select menu, loops, select loops, edge loop, and that'll select that loop. It's similar for any edge. Like that. And what we want to start doing is just doing some basic shaping. So we're switching to the rotate. And just changing the basic shape of the, whoops, there's that vertex at the bottom there. So switch to vertex mode. So what we're doing is just shaping the mesh to create some very basic, well, a very basic block out. And it gives us the basic shapes that we need. Whoops. And this would be similar for clothing as well. So what we are basically doing actually, let's try a different approach. So toggle that, delete that, delete, try that again. So this is real time. What often is the case is that you're doing something and it doesn't look as if it's going to work, so just delete it, get rid of it. Don't waste your time, don't fret over it, just get rid of it and start again. Because what you can do is get carried away with doing some things that are unnecessary. So I'm going to start using shortcut keys because it's quicker, but you should be able to see what's being done. So if I add a loop cut to this, I'm using Control R, which is a shortcut key. But the appearance of the widget, this yellow line, is indicative of the loop cut function. So regardless as to whether you use a shortcut, Control R, or you're using the toolbar icon, loop cut always displays this yellow widget before you actually start the cut. It's just that the shortcuts are quicker, and it's all learned muscle memory, so there's less computational resources of the grey matter being used, largely because muscle memory. So what we're going to do instead is let's try this way. So extrude, and extrude that back face. And this may not work either. But that's how the dice roll. Because sometimes you just have to try a number of approaches to doing something before you get the end result you were after. And of course it does help that it isn't 8 o'clock in the morning. So when you're doing this, it should be fully awake and coffee induced. Actually, no, let's leave it really long. So all we're doing now is just blocking in the basic shapes we need and the position of things. But we need to add a bit more structure because, or let me think about that. Right, so what we could do with is a bit more because we don't have enough internal structure to pull these edges or these vertices into shape where they need to be, so we can add a loop because the front, we might have to start this again actually, but it's follow the same principle, because what we need to do, let's get rid of the let's move that up here, move Beanie up there, where's the upper torso gone? Oh, that's it. Because what we need in fact, what we could probably do is add this manually. So what we need is a loop cut that goes up and around the top there, and the same for this side. So we may have to use the knife tool for that. So the loop comes around the top, goes down the bottom, down the side, and to that vertex. So let's enable knife. Click. Drag. So that's created a loop. So what we can do now is get rid of this one, double tap, G key, edge slide, whoops, oh, it's not going to do it. So double tap vertex, edge slide, do the same on the back. But we have to be careful because you can end up creating too much structure that you then have to clean up and manipulate, which we ideally want to try and avoid. Right, so that's collapsed those, but we need to get rid of the doubles. So select all, mesh, clean up, merge by distance. This is now called, instead of it being called remove doubles or rem dub, it's now called merge by distance. That just removes, whoops, 9 vertices. So now we can start shaping the mesh to fit the body. Whoops. And we've got because of using the knife tool, we've got a number of stray vertices. So we need to get rid of those. So select the parent first, or the vertex that's going to be the one that should remain, and then shift click the other vertices. And this is where is this one? Oh, there it is. No, that's not right. Where is it? I used this yesterday. This is one of the frustrating things about Blender 2.8, because not only have they moved things, oh there it is, merge vertices. Honestly, this is one of the problems with Blender, particularly if you're going from major version to major version. So 2.49 to 2.50 was a complete overhaul of the interface, and a number of the menu items were moved. Then going from 2.5 to 7 to then 2.8 is another rejigging of the interface, which has meant that all the shortcut keys, not all of them, but a lot of shortcut keys and a lot of the menu items have been moved and renamed. So not only are they in completely different positions from where they used to be, but they're also called something else. So all that muscle memory that you learn from 5 to 7, which is several years, trips you up when you switch to a later version. So if you're using 2.79 to make content and you're already using it, it's best just to stick with that for most of your products, and slowly use 2.8 for smaller projects like accessories, smaller accessory items or things like that, so that you get yourself used to Blender 2.80 before you make the full switch. Because if you make a full switch and just go cold turkey from 7.9 to 8, you're going to struggle, because a lot of the shortcuts have changed, a lot of the menu items have changed. So what we're doing here is merging the vertices together, and because we selected the one that we want to remain, which is the first one, so what we're doing is merging at first. So all those vertexes that are selected, so there's 3, that's the first one, and these 2, we want those to merge to it. So vertex, merge vertices at first, and they collapse together. So that now becomes a unified point in the file. Oh, and you've got some on the other side as well. So click, shift click. Oh, so we've got some at the back, so we need to go over the mesh and just quickly check. So even though these vertexes, these cuts I should say, were created with the tools snapping to the edge, it's still added some odd... Oh, hi Robert. Sorry, I had chat covered. Just making a scarf to accompany a beanie hat that we made yesterday. So let's take a look at our references, which we can't show on screen for my copyright. So we want this to, whoops, broadly follow the contours of the avatar. Yeah, I'm just going to use the shortcut keys because it's quicker. There's a folded, so we've folded in on ourselves there. So there's a vertex there somewhere. Where is it? Hide the torso. Oh, it's this one that's down here. So that should be up there. But what we might be able to do is just delete these inside faces for now, because we can always come back to those to reconstruct the mesh. But up. Oh, we've got some stray vertices there as well. So that's the only disadvantage with using the knife tool. You get the control, the manual placement control, so you can control where the cut occurs, which you don't always have with loop cut. But the disadvantage is that you end up with a lot of stray vertex placements because of the way that the cut tool actually works. So vertex merge at first. There we go. So this is X-ray, this icon at the top. Wireframe, as it used to be in 7.9, doesn't exist anymore. We've got this feature called X-ray, which enables or disables being able to see through the mesh. Let's hide our beanie. Kind of getting there. But as mentioned yesterday, a lot of this stuff is just riffing. Have absolutely no idea what we're doing, and we have absolutely no idea how to achieve whatever it is that we're doing. So we're just shoving things around to see what happens. See what sort of shapes that we can get. But we're always trying to keep the structure as simple as possible to start with, so that we're not working with too much detail. Right, so we need to tidy up the inside of that, because so which is what loop? So that's that loop. So that's gone a bit wonky there. There we go, that's better. Okay, so we're kind of getting there. Let's just save that. I don't know if we will be able to do this in our time frame. If not, we shall continue with it tomorrow, as we did with the beanie hat. Hold on a second. Don't know why I didn't think of doing this before. Just using mobile to do chat. Even with several things on screen. How do you pause the thing? My technology. Right, so torso. Sorry about that. Doesn't seem to allow you to pause video on mobile, so it basically means it's playing at the same time. It's playing all the time, so you can't pause it and just chat. Right, so get our structure to follow the mesh or follow the avatar. Let's bring this down. Right, so let's pull this a bit further out over the shoulders. So now we have to start adding a bit more. Whoops. Because we don't necessarily want that. To end up where it just did. Okay, so what we need to do, need to keep these edges beveled like that. And then change this top loop . So there's a lot of we mentioned this yesterday, but one of the thing with clothing is there's an assumption that it's relatively easy to do. But it's not. It's actually quite difficult to do. depending on what it is that you're trying to do, obviously. Because you're not only... The issue is not so much that you are making a shirt, or in this instance we're making a scarf, but you've got to describe the shapes that you're trying to make in a way that's going to make sense of the mesh structure itself. So you've got to always try and keep your mesh structure sensible, because you can always then just add more to it. It's easier to add stuff than it is necessarily to take away. So for example, extruding, so that's this button, or just pressing the shortcut key E. Scale that inwards. And now we can make this a bit more round or floppy. There's a bit of, because of the way that we've, where's the top? Because of the way that the front end was made here, we've got this edge that's stretched up all the way up there, but we can't really make a cut, because what we could do is relieve that stress by making a cut across there, but there's no structure, there's no corresponding structure on the other side to that, because that is essentially that edge, I think. Yes, it is. So the corresponding edge or group of vertexes, the corresponding edge to this side is this one. So we are stretching. So what we ordinarily what might be done here is the way that we divided the mesh. This would be extruded, and then we would have this edge would make more sense, because this side is a companion to this side on that group of edges that describe that shape. But because we haven't done that, in order to get the drop, it creates this awkward shape on the inside, where we've got this edge quite comfortably describes the shoulder, so the shoulder is here, but it's created this awkward structure. So these things crop up, and there aren't any particularly easy solutions to things like that when they occur. So what we could do, because we don't need the inside of the mesh, we don't actually need to see it. So what we could do is delete the inside of the mesh. So let's delete that. Hang on, let's save this just before we do this. So this is why you do version saves. So we're about to do something that's quite destructive to this. So do a version save. Whoops, where is it? Save as 3. So we can now comfortably delete that. So that's the delete key or the X key. Get the same thing, or mesh delete, and it'll do the same thing. Faces. So we've got rid of the inside of that. So what we can do now is use this corner and use that to create an edge that we can then snap that to. So it'll make sense in a second when I do it. So what we can do is use the knife tool, make sure that's snapped to the vertex. It is. Snap, snap, snap. Select, select, vertex. Merge at first. So we've now got ourselves a bit more structure. So it gives us a bit of relief for that corner. So we've taken advantage of the fact that we don't need the inside of the mesh because you can't see it when the product's being worn. Well, you can at the moment, but the way that it'll eventually be structured, you won't be able to see it. So we need a bit of relief here. So we're going to select those and split, subdivide. So that's now created an awkward n-gon. So we need to split this or reorganize that so that we create a quad at the top, triangle at the bottom. Select, face, triangulate, and join those two back together into a quad. So like we did with the beanie, we're just building up the profile that we need and shaping the mesh. And trying to create contours. So we're not necessarily making a scarf per se. What we're doing is contouring a structure to fit a shape that keeps our mesh, that keeps the mesh itself, how should we say, comfortably structured. So let's have a look at the beanie. So that's the beanie. And we can see from the way the beanie's structured, or the way that that looks, we've got something from the scarf that looks not too dissimilar to it, or it accompanies, or as a complement to the appearance of the beanie. So as with the beanie yesterday, you don't necessarily need to do loads and loads of detail, because what you're actually doing is just describing shapes as opposed to so instead of thinking of it as a beanie and a scarf, so you then get caught up in having to model a scarf and a beanie. What you're actually doing is just describing shapes. I mean, it sounds odd, but it's the difference between getting caught up in adding folds and folds and folds in your fabric instead of just describing basic shapes and then letting the texture that's applied to this do all the work for you, which is what you should be doing. So we can start now to add a bit more detail. So we're using the shortcut keys for loop cut. That's Control R. We can use the mouse button, middle mouse button, scroll up and down to add a number of loops. And then we can place those, because the loop cut tool doesn't work the same way. Once you place your cut, let's undo those. Once you place your cut, where's the widget gone? Oh, I did that yesterday. I'm not sure why it's not doing it today. So yesterday when we did this, we got a little thing at the top that allowed us to place a number of loop cuts. That's odd. Whoops. But that's Blender for you. It's mostly odd. Oops, what's that done? Oh, it's added another loop there, so we need to get rid of that. So select all, mesh, clean up merge by distance. So we need to add, looks like, a bit of relief on this section on this side and on this side, so that we can deform the mesh a bit more to suit the avatar. But we'll do that in a second. So that looks okay, so let's just do the back. Save the file again before we do that. Save as. For yeah, so again we've got this odd section where we're stretching the face, and this happens with happens quite a lot with these types of structures where you are doing essentially multi-planar. You've got things coming off the mesh in all sorts of directions, and understanding how you should structure your mesh to accommodate those kinds of things is pretty tricky, even for seasoned meshers. See, so might need to get rid of those so that we can restructure that section of the mesh. So before we do that, let's collapse that edge. So select it, loop cut, not loop cut, loop select, double tap. Where is that going? Yeah, we have to redo that, so undo that. So I have to get rid of these edges, faces. Delete. And rebuild this section. I wonder. So again, this is what a lot of this stuff is. It's just trial and error, trying to see what works and what doesn't. So what we can do is that taken out. So let's just do the back. Whoops. Resting on the avatar's buns. So, and of course, if you are making this for one of the modern or the newer avatars, you're going to have to do quite a bit of trial and error when you're shaping your mesh to make sure that it fits the shape of the avatar. And how you do that to these custom meshes, which generally speaking don't grant access to their meshes, means that you're going to be doing a lot of trial and error to make things fit. So you don't want everything to be sat actually on the avatar all the time, because you've got to accommodate clothing. So we might have to make some adjustments to this. Particularly at the top on the shoulders, because we've modelled this as if it's going to sit on, you know, the avatar as it currently is. But what we may need to do is just pull those up the shoulders, off the shoulders, to give us more room, which then means that avatars with coats and other tops can wear the item. So let's add a loop cut and then split that face. So we create two quads. That now gives us a bit of relief on the front. Which we can now trace that edge down, and we can use it to shape the front to be less flat as it currently is. So a knife tool, oh, that's created a whole load of extra vertices again. That's created a whole load of them. There we go. So let's take that from that vertex to that one. So as mentioned earlier, a lot of this is literally just trial and error. Just trying different things to see if they shape the mesh the way that you're expecting it to, and it gets you the shapes that you want. So what we want is a slight overhang of the fabric as it wraps around the drop that's at the front. Hello, Cafe. We're just making a rather large woolen scarf for IMVU. And this may be a two-parter because we're coming up to an hour and a half. And if you've ever tried to make clothing or anything that uses the clothing starter file, It's not quite as straightforward as it could be. So the scarf is going to match, well not match, it's going to complement the beanie. So we've got this really thick woolen beanie that we made in a couple of previous episodes. And all we're doing now is matching the beanie with a scarf, and we're kind of there. There's just a couple of things that we could add to it, but we should probably have to do those tomorrow in the 10th day of Creator Mass. But that's the other thing. This stuff takes quite a while to do. There isn't a, especially when you're making clothing or anything to do with clothes, it takes a lot of time, and more likely than not, several attempts. So the first attempt that we tried wasn't working, so we just got rid of it. Don't waste your time, just get rid of it and start again. There's no shame or no harm in doing that. That's a very awkward triangle. Yeah, so there's no shame in getting rid of things when they're not working. Just start again. That doesn't look too bad, actually. It matches our thick woolen beanie quite well. So this is one of those really, really thick scarves that you can buy. Yeah, that's not too bad. I think we'll call it quits there for today. Is the wireframe enabled? No, it's not. There's the wireframe, so we can see the wireframe. We'll call it quits there for today, and we shall continue this on the morrow with number 10. Save as Creator Mass number 10. Episode 10, I should say. So it doesn't look too bad. Getting there. So yesterday. So tomorrow, what we'll probably do, that isn't shaped too bad actually. So what we'll do tomorrow is we'll tidy up. That's a bit better than I was expecting actually. So even as elite. Oops, get rid of that bad face. Get rid of that. That's a very bad face. It's twisted back on itself. So tomorrow what we can do is we'll tidy up some of this structure. So we've got this big open gap. We don't need it to be closed. So we don't need all of this to be filled in with faces. But what we do need to do, or what you would need to do anyway, is, as with the beanie, we did this with the beanie in fact actually, so let's have a quick look at the beanie. So the front edge of the beanie is here, runs around the, and that fits the head. Whoops. But that's left, or that would have left, whoops, some gaps. So there would have been a gap here. That's the leading edge. And there would have been a gap here on the other side. So what we've done is extruded that edge backwards so that we've still got an open mesh. We don't need to close that. We've still got an open mesh, but we've essentially backstopped the gap so that when you're looking through the mesh, you actually see part of the beanie. So we'll do the same sort of thing tomorrow with the headscarf, with the scarf. We'll backstop this so that this gap isn't filled completely, but there is some structure that we can hide these gaps with. So it'll intersect with the mesh and it'll hide this big gap that we've got. So we'll do that tomorrow, but we'll also add a bit more detail, so we can add, in the same way that we've got with the beanie, we've got these folds in the cloth, these channels. We can add a couple of those to the scarf, maybe something like that, and add one at the front. So we'll do that tomorrow. But before we go, just rename this. So select Object Properties. In the Name ID field, just click that and we'll call this scarfy.mesh. So there's scarfy.mesh and there's beanie.mesh. Save that. Right, so that's what we'll do tomorrow. So thank you for watching, lurkers. Thanks for commenting. Robert2217 OK, and Oaf Cafe. Off AUF. Not sure how you pronounce that. It's German, I guess. But we shall see you tomorrow. So adieu, as they say in Spain.